You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Syracuse football needs to have a short-term memory in order to avoid a second half collapse. What do I mean by that? This is not something that's necessarily X's and O's. I can't tell you like, hey, they should run this play instead of that play, or you should play this player over that player, or whatever. This is not an X's and O's. This is something that is intangible, okay? You need to have a short-term memory, and hopefully with this new coaching staff, right? This is a brand new coaching staff. This is different than those prior 3 seasons. Prior 3 seasons, Dino Babers was the head coach of Syracuse football. Now, we got a brand new head coach in Fran Brown. We also have a brand new offensive coordinator in Jeff Nixon. And we have a brand new defensive coordinator in Elijah Robinson. Brand new coaching staff, all right? They need to preach having a short-term memory, all right? Forget the loss to Pitt. Just forget it, bury it in the trash, and move on. Fran Brown actually mentioned in the press conference today about still competing for the ACC title. Now, do I think that's possible? No. I guess it's mathematically possible, right? The math says that there is a mathematical chance it can happen, and you still have to operate with that mindset if you're an athlete. But for all intents and purposes, it's not going to happen, okay? They're not going to compete for the ACC title, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me because you still need to go out and have a successful regular season, right? We talked about it on a couple of days ago on the podcast, what a successful regular season can do, right? Help recruiting, right? As far as the players and coaches, putting more film on tape is always important, right? So you still have plenty to play for. I guess they are still mathematically alive. I wanted to mention that comment from Fran Brown, though. The loss to Pitt was terrible. You've got to flush it down the toilet. And I refuse to believe that that is really who Syracuse is. I refuse to believe that that is the game that defines Syracuse. I don't believe it. I think this team is better than what they showed last Thursday night. I'm not saying that Syracuse was going to be a contender or a true contender in the ACC. Had they won the game, I would say that. But they were not as bad as what happened on Thursday night. They got to have the we're on to Cincinnati approach. That's a shout out to Bill Belichick, who I hate, but as a Jets fan, I definitely respect him. We're on to Cincinnati. Where does that phrase come from? A lot of people don't remember that. In 2014, Patriots ended up winning the Super Bowl that season. But in 2014, Brady wasn't playing well. The Patriots were 2-2, and they were coming off a terrible loss in Kansas City on a Monday night. It was an awful lot. They got blown out. And Brady had a terrible game. He was 37 at the time, and people thought after that, that was the end of the Patriots dynasty, that Tom Brady was washed. I'm not going to sit here and say that Syracuse football is like the New England Patriots dynasty, but you get the idea. After the game, Bill Belichick in the press conference said, we're on to Cincinnati. Every time he was asked something, he kept on saying, we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati. And then what happened? The Patriots played Cincinnati in another primetime game, and they spanked them. And they go 12-4 in that season. They ended up winning the Super Bowl. Again, not comparing Syracuse to the dynastic Patriots, but it's that lesson of having a short-term memory. And that's what this coaching staff needs to preach. Forget the Pitt game. Forget it. Move on. Bury it. I don't want to hear enough. No more, right? Because in 2023, 2022, and in 2021, one of the reasons why they collapsed, right? One of the reasons why they collapsed is they let it spiral. They let a bad game or a bad series of games spiral out of control. Last season, when they were 4-0, they lost 3 straight blowouts. We talked about those games, though, all against far superior competition. All against, you would have liked that if Syracuse showed better fight in those games, but they were all against superior teams. All of them. Better competition right there. You notice how I didn't talk about what happened in that 4th game when they went to 4-4? I'll tell you what happened in that 4th game. They got blown out on the road against Virginia Tech. Blown out on the road against Virginia Tech was a good team. Nothing to take away from them. They're a good team again this year. They got embarrassed in that game. Absolutely embarrassed. It's like they just, hello, it wasn't Florida State on the road anymore. You're playing against Virginia Tech, right? Short-term memory. But they just let those losses linger on too long. That's what I think happened. 2022, they suffer a heartbreaker at Clemson. Then they get blown out by Notre Dame. Then they lose at Pitt. And the losses just kept piling up. They let it get to them. 2021, less so the case. It was only a 3-game losing streak, and it was one really bad game at Louisville, and then you got 2 teams that were just far better than them at that time. But you get the idea, hopefully, that, look, they didn't have a short-term memory. They didn't just bury the tape and move on. They let it linger. And that's one of the reasons why I think they collapsed. And hopefully the Syracuse coaching staff can preach short-term memory for this team. They've already shown it that they can bounce back. This team's already shown they can bounce back because they're 5-2 this season. That means they've lost at some point this year. Where did they lose? They lost in week 3 to Stanford. That game was terrible. It was brutal. Brutal loss to Stanford, right? What'd they do after? Well, they went on a 3-game win streak right after that. Why can't they go on a 3-game win streak now? Why not? So let's see if Syracuse football can have that short-term memory of a goldfish, if you will, and bounce back against Virginia Tech. Again, forget the Pitt game. It's over. It's done. You can't change the result. No more dwelling on it. Move on. Virginia Tech this Saturday at noon. All right? So, why do I believe that Syracuse football is going to avoid a major second-half collapse compared to the prior 3 seasons? Number one, they got more quarterback stability and a more talented quarterback in Kyle McCord. Even though he's coming off his worst game, I still believe in him. Number two, the schedule is not easy for Syracuse football down the stretch, but it is much more manageable compared to the past 3 seasons. Number three, this coaching staff should preach short-term memory. Bury the Pitt loss and just move on.